Well, hi everyone, and welcome to our talk today, which the title is The 5 Blood Tests for Longevity. And I had written a post a couple days ago or yesterday, I'm not sure when, and I kind of coined the phrase, we're looking for the credit score for longevity. And I think I really like that title, that concept, a credit score for longevity. And it's probably because I'm all about credit card points right now for luxury-free travel in my retirement. So I'm kind of focused on those kind of ideas probably. But yeah, today we're going to talk about measuring how we're winning at our fitness and our nutrition. And so I thought I'd just start with a little overview, some basic dialogue around, well, what is blood and what is its purpose? So blood circulates in our arteries and it circulates oxygen and nutrients and hormones out to the cells and the tissues. And all of our systems in our body need oxygen to make energy. The muscles, the digestion, even our thinking. And so blood's, of course, vital for those purposes. And then it returns waste products as it circulates the blood back to the heart and lungs to clean it. So that's primarily CO2 or carbon dioxide. And so we're all familiar with blood testing. So we know that blood testing helps us check for disease. It helps us understand any kind of conditions we have. Maybe helps check the function of various organs, be it the liver, the kidney, the thyroid, the heart. You might check for things like diabetes. We're aware of those kind of things. But when it comes to longevity, or think of vitality, thriving health, how do we know that we're winning? So, we know we feel good when we're exercising and eating right. We know we're adding muscle. We know we're sleeping better, managing stress. Maybe our genes fit better. So we know some of those subjective things. But what are the objective blood tests that tell us that we're doing well and that we're having excellent health? So that's what we're going to really focus on and drill into across my 5 blood tests or biomarkers for longevity. And they're going to focus on a few areas. The first we're going to talk about is metabolism, and we'll explain what metabolism means and what that gets involved in and how we measure that. We'll talk about a couple of major hormones that are important that we're working on with our weightlifting and our nutrition. And then a biggie for heart health and immune response that we need to pay attention to is inflammation. So metabolism, hormones, and inflammation are kind of some of the big things that longevity is concerned with. And I had illustrated a note in the invitation that Dr. Peter Attia, he's a MD of longevity. He talks about what he calls the 4 horsemen of aging, and I'll just list them out real quick. He considers these the big things that get in front of us in the way of chronic disease, and they include cancers, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, and metabolic disease, which incorporates a few different things like visceral fat, type 2 diabetes, etc. So we're going to find that the blood markers that I'm interested in telling you about are going to address most of those 4 horsemen. So let's go ahead and start with a little discussion about metabolism. So what is metabolism? It's going to be focused on about 4 or 5 things that help us function optimally. And one is energy production. And we know that the primary sources for energy in our body are glucose and fat. So 2 of my top biomarkers are going to be looking at that. And then tissue maintenance, so meaning building bone mineral density and muscle tissue. And then, like I say, waste removal, CO2 and other toxins. Metabolism is concerned with regulating body weight. And then finally, a big one for metabolism is hormone production. So these are the chemical messengers in our blood that help us with various bodily functions, sleeping, alertness, glucose, metabolism, everything like that. So we know there are 3 simple things we can do to improve our metabolism. And we talk about these in my posts from time to time. Don't over rely on cardio. Cardio is very important. You need to do it every day. But we talk about zone 2 and we talk about 20 minutes. But we don't want you spending hours on the treadmill thinking that's how you're going to efficiently lose weight and fat, because what that'll actually do is put you in endurance mode and slow down your metabolism. You need to do more strength training. So that's what we're all about, is lifting weights. And that does so many good things for our metabolism, because insulin sensitivity, or the body's ability to react to insulin, is most improved with building lean skeletal muscle. And then you need to consume enough calories. So you don't want to underdo or undercut your calories thinking that's the best way to lose weight and fat, because that will actually slow down your metabolism as well. So there are dozens of blood panels, and I'm not going to be able to list everything out there. And my list isn't all inclusive, but it is designed by longevity research groups that I follow. One in particular is Inside Tracker. And so they've kind of cut it down to the top 5 things, which I like. And they also recommend, among most experts do too, that you track your data. So whether it's once a year, like most people do, I actually get my blood tests done twice a year. And what's important about that is it's important. It's good to know your point in time information, and that's very valuable. But I also like to see the trend. Like as I'm working out, as I'm changing my diet, improving my sleep, lowering my stress, how are my metrics trending? Because to me, that's almost more important than the point in time values. And so anyway, the pillars of longevity, like we know, are what we eat, how we move, how we respond to stress, and the quality of our sleep. And we might throw in there some supplementation to call it 5 pillars, but those are the primary 4. So let's go ahead and list out the blood tests that I want to talk about. And we'll talk about how to improve them and kind of what they do for us, the things we're measuring. So in my short list will be vitamin D. It's the most important vitamin of all. Hemoglobin sugar, which is HbA1c, or hemoglobin glucose. And then we're going to talk about the lipid panel. So what's lipids? That just means fat particles, the fat that we digest in our food. And it comes in 2 primary flavors, lipids. It's going to either be packaged up as cholesterol, and those are high density and low density lipoproteins, and then triglycerides. So all the fat that we consume is going to be packaged up in one of those 2 formats. Primarily it's triglycerides. We're going to talk about testosterone, which is a really big one for us undergoing the weight training routine and getting good sleep and sunshine and everything like that. And then the big one that we want to look at in regards to heart health and an immune response is going to be CRP, which stands for C-reactive protein. It's an enzyme made in our liver in response to inflammation, but we'll talk about that more in just a little bit. Okay, so the first test is vitamin D, and this is a real interesting one. I did an expanded Zoom on this, and I think we're going to share some of these in a library so you can kind of access them, but I was pretty proud of it. The thing with vitamin D, it's a double-edged sword. The health benefits of the vitamin D, of optimal vitamin D, are vast, and the penalties of deficient vitamin D are also vast in regards to interfering with bone mineral density and major stuff like that. And as I kind of alluded to in the invite, I'm reading that 42% of American men are deficient in vitamin D, and I'll define the optimal range and what's deficient mean in just a second here. Vitamin D is known as a vitamin, and it's known as a hormone because we can get it through foods that we eat. It's a pretty small list of foods, and it's also made by our body as a hormone. The things that vitamin D helps us with are incredible, and they include things like our immune system. It increases both our muscle protein synthesis as well as the size and number of muscle fibers, believe it or not. It helps boost our testosterone levels if we have good vitamin D. It improves our cholesterol panel, so the LDL and HDL improve in the right directions. And we're going to enjoy better sleep if we get strong levels of vitamin D. So the National Institutes of Health recommends you can get 90% of your vitamin D recommendation by safely being exposed to limited amounts of sunshine. So they're saying 10 to 20 minutes of safe limited exposure with 20% uncovered skin will, and when you're exposed to UVB sunlight 2 to 3 times a week, that will be what you really need. And I'm telling you, I don't take any supplementation currently, and my vitamin D level is right in the middle of the optimal range just by getting that sunshine exposure. Food intake might account for up to 10% of vitamin D that we can receive. And then supplementation is also helpful for folks, especially during the winter months, maybe when there's less UVB or you don't want to get outside because it's cold. So that can be a good tool that you can use for your vitamin D needs as well. In the blood, the range for normal vitamin D is 30 to 100. It's called nanograms per deciliter. That's considered normal. So if you're below 30, then you are vitamin D deficient. And that's where I say 42% Americans are. The optimal or sweet spot range for vitamin D, where you really want to be, is between 40 and 60 nanograms per deciliter. That's considered optimal. And like I say, my most recent test measured me at 51.1. And I'll tell you something interesting. I was over supplementing. I've told this story before. And so a year ago, I was taking 10,000 international units of vitamin D supplementation every day, not knowing that was way too much. And my vitamin D blood lab came in at 111 nanogram per deciliter, so kind of over the normal range, considered high but safe. So this is just a good reminder, I think, to tell you guys it's important to test, don't guess. And just real quickly, we know that the vitamin D foods are pretty short list. It's going to include things like salmon, egg yolks, and milk products, among a few others. But so pretty limited in the way of food. So it's really getting it from the sun and from supplementation. Okay, the second test I want to speak about is called C-reactive protein. I really like this blood test for you guys, and you can order it in a couple of formats. If you just order C-reactive protein, you're going to get an answer you won't like because it's just going to tell you under or over 1, which to me doesn't tell me anything. The one I like for you guys that gives you a decimal place of accuracy is called HS, or highly sensitive CRP. It's also known as cardiac CRP. So this is an enzyme, like I alluded to earlier, made in our liver in response to inflammation. And like I say, inflammation is the result of the immune system being stressed. And it happens as a natural part of aging. So it's actually a sign of aging to see that your inflammation is increasing, and we don't want that. Optimal inflammation is low or none. So it's tied to metabolic syndrome and disease, and it is a marker of lifespan and also health span. What can we do to lower inflammation? So anti-inflammatory foods would include things with omega-3 in it. So that's our salmon, our tuna. It also includes lots of vegetarian stuff like tofu, flaxseed, soybeans, blueberries, and olive oil. So there's a wide array of things that help us with lowering our inflammation. Vitamin D actually lowers inflammation. So being in the sun reduces your inflammation. Being properly hydrated, reducing your stress, getting enough sleep. And then I'll say this with a smile because this is my Zoom. Some people believe that being barefoot, or called earthing, leads to reductions in inflammation. So if you're out playing Frisbee or throwing the football, kick your shoes off and be exposed to your feet touching the grass. And, hey, it's free and it might help you. Who knows? It's something I actually do every day on a nice day, is walk barefoot in my favorite park. The range for CRP is anywhere between 0, which is optimal, and 3, is considered kind of on the high end, but it can be much higher. So one of my friends, I won't name her name, but she's got Crohn's disease, which is a highly inflammatory GI disease, and her CRP comes in at 7, which is extremely high. Optimally, you want to see it below 1, and mine measures at 0.54. So this is because we're following all Will's protocols and doing all the right things with exercise and nutrition. Okay. Now let's talk about a couple of the energy sources that we metabolize for energy. And so one of the primary ones is sugar, or glucose. So my favorite test for looking at your hemoglobin sugar is HbA1c. That's what that is. So it's an indication of how the body processes blood sugar. Now, keep in mind, we don't want this to be 0. We need glucose. It's essential for our energy and our body's function. It's our primary source of energy. But there's a healthy range is what we're looking for. So to have optimal metabolism, so not too little and not too much. Glucose regulation can decline with age. And so it's real important to pay attention to your diet and do your exercising, which improves the insulin sensitivity when you do your resistance training. So the optimal range to stay within with your HbA1c is 4.8 to 5.6%. Don't want to be below it, don't want to be above it. When you get above 5.6, that's called pre-diabetes. So that 5.7 to 6.4, and you're really going to be considered pre-diabetic. And I have a couple of former coworkers that told me that they've just been tested as pre-diabetic. So it's pretty easy. In fact, I'm going to tell you this, more than 1 in 3 Americans are pre-diabetic, and most people don't even know it. It's higher for men, up to 41%. So it's pretty remarkable. My HbA1c is 5.3, so it's kind of right there in the middle of that sweet spot. And that's because we're following the low glycemic index. We're lifting weights for insulin sensitivity, things like that. So it's a real good one to pay attention to. Then related to energy is the other source, and that is lipids or fats. So the fourth category, this is widely tested and known by all you guys, is cholesterol, as well as triglycerides. I'm sure that's pretty commonly tested by your primary doctor. So both are inherited by your family tree or your ancestors primarily on the cholesterol side. We have a lot of control over the triglycerides because that's the food that we put in our mouth. But we can influence cholesterol with a little bit with exercise, especially our HDL, the high density or the good cholesterol. Also, vitamin D, like I told you, influences cholesterol, and somewhat nutrition will too. But you're stuck with what your mom and dad gave you for a large degree. And I do have high cholesterol, both LDL, the bad kind, as well as HDL, the really good kind. Most of the fat that we eat gets packaged up as triglycerides, and those are just little tiny fat-covered particles, and they don't dissolve in the blood. So just real quick, the range for LDL optimally is you want to stay underneath 100 milligrams per deciliter. HDL, you want that as high as possible. The higher the better, I should say. Over 39 is considered minimal for your health, and above 60 is considered highly protective or ideal. So I'll brag about my HDL. It's 82. It's been as high as 90. It can fluctuate. But my LDL is also really high. It's 174, so way over that 99 ideal limit. But I'm going to give you a couple of metrics that I like and I've read about, and they're ratios to help you make sense of all these numbers floating around. Now, real quick on triglycerides, that's again measured in milligrams per deciliter. You want to see it in a range of 0 to 149, but really it's more tight than that. Ideally, you want to see it 70 to 75 if you can manage. That's considered ideal. Okay, so you have all these numbers. What do you do with them? One of my favorite metrics for the lipids, or the combination of cholesterol and triglycerides, is to look at total cholesterol divided by HDL. If you can take one divided by the other, you want to just see that sits in a range or below. The lower the better. 3.5 to 5 is considered just fine or normal health. Mine comes into 3.2. So even though I've got really high LDL, the fact that my HDL is significantly above healthy levels keeps my ratio good. The other ratio that I like very much is to look at triglycerides as your numerator divided by HDL. So here we want to see that ratio sit below 2. And because my triglycerides are only 63 and my HDL is so high, my ratio is 0.8, so I'm well below 2. So that's what we want to look at with regard to our lipid panel. And like I say, I think most people have that tested regularly. The next one is testosterone, and I added this one. I think it's real important for men doing weightlifting and looking at their fitness, and it has a lot of influence on longevity. Harvard research says that men with normal levels of testosterone show remarkable longevity compared to with low levels. And we know that testosterone naturally can decline with age for men that aren't focused on resistance training and stuff like that. So it starts at around age 40 and kind of slowly declines for the average American. But the best method to raise your testosterone is compound resistance training. By far, that's the solution. But we also know some things to stay away from. So some testosterone destroyers include things like alcohol, stress, and believe it or not, overtraining. So doing too much resistance training without giving yourself a chance for active recovery is going to raise your cortisol, your stress hormone, and reduce your testosterone. So you want to be careful there. Dehydration, excess body fat, And then refined carbohydrates and sugar are actually no good for your testosterone as well. So we know that nutrition plays a part there. Longevity risks associated with low levels of testosterone includes coronary artery disease, metabolic syndrome, so that's type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, among other things. So anyway, the testosterone is sensitive to the time of day. It peaks around 8 a.m., so upon waking or thereabouts, and then it declines throughout the day. And then it's its lowest at 8 p.m. And then testosterone builds itself back up during the sleep cycle. So that's why it's really important to have good quality sleep, is to protect your hormone production like testosterone. So in summary, these blood labs will show you that your food and your exercise are helping you age well. So again, we're talked about vitamin D, which is immune and tissue building, CRP or C-reactive protein, that's for inflammation and heart health, our lipid panel, so that's the fat that's circulating in our blood, so that's our cholesterol and our triglycerides. The other energy element is glucose. So I like HbA1c or hemoglobin sugar for that one. And then testosterone, which I call our tissue building and muscle and bone building hormone. So anyway, if you keep track of all these numbers and they're trending favorably, then you are creating a robust longevity credit score. So anyway, I left a little bit of time and went through that fairly quickly, but if anyone has any questions or clarifying comments, be happy to indulge those.
Hey, Brett. It's just fantastic information. I mean, it really just boils down to understanding, in my main takeaway, understanding your reference point and then determining what progress you're making. Because, just like, I mean, I can like make the comparison to a body weight. So somebody who's like, oh, I'm 300 pounds and I'm 5'10", it's like, oh no, like, that's terrible. Okay. But however, let's just assume that 3 months later, you're obviously the same height and you're 270 pounds. You could think, oh my God, that's terrible also, but you're not taking consideration the trajectory curve that you're on. So having a point of reference is essential. So, and it's misleading too, because I should say it's not as transparent. When you're 300 pounds, you're 300 pounds, but you don't know what these biomarkers are until you get blood work done and have a point of reference. And then from that awareness, then you can determine, these certain biomarkers to determine, what is your overall, metabolic health. And, what are some of the strategies, and ultimately, like you mentioned, everything that we do here corresponds with maximizing your internal and external health. The external metrics are what most of us look at because they're black and white. They're on the outside. We want to look good. We want to be strong. We want to have muscle. We want to have low body fat. But we have to analyze those internal metrics because that's what's going to keep us alive. And a lot of times, we just assume, oh, hey, we're going to be alive regardless. And no, not necessarily. And we all know that chronic disease, it seems sometimes like, oh, it just came about. And that's never the case. It's never the case. It's always something that's, brewing behind the scenes that, we're not getting exposed to unless we get these tests done. So this is just very appreciated. And I really enjoyed just the content and the overall message.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I love your analysis, which is, I call it the trend is your friend. So just like when you do a before and after picture for the program, having a baseline and then knowing that your strategies are working. So as you're lifting weights, if you see your HDL going up, that's just, to me, a proof point that what you're doing is the right thing for your trajectory. So yeah, that's
Exactly.
great commentary.
Awesome, buddy. Appreciate the time.
Yes, sir. And thank you guys for your time, and we'll get this recorded and posted onto the app. Thank you, guys.
Thanks again.